Yeah. So we end up seeing the decrease in conduction. So we're looking at our heart. The cooler it gets, the same thing. We start to see a decrease in conduction velocity. So impulses that would normally travel at a normal rate down our SA node, AB node, and into our Purkinje fibers can't do that because of the cool environment. So in the early stages of hypothermia, we're going to have catecholamine release, or we release our epinephrine and norepinephrine in order to respond to what's going on. So in the early stages, if we're having lots of catecholamines released, would heart rate go up or down? Yeah, it goes up. So in the early stages, we generally see increased heart rate and either a normal or hypertensive blood pressure. And that's because the body's compensating for this recognition of hypothermia. So we see an increase in heart rate and potentially normal or increased blood pressure. Now, as we continue through hypothermia, like Jenny said, we're going to see a decrease in conduction velocity. So basically, the amount of speed in which our impulses will travel will become slow. So the heart is impacted by seeing a decrease in conduction velocity, or the speed in which we'll have electrical impulses traveling down the heart, and the pacemaker cells themselves are affected. So we generally have automaticity in those pacemaker cells. Basically, that automaticity is slowed. So we have a slowed response of pacemaker cells, which is just going to decrease the heart rate in general. So decreasing conduction velocity, and we slow pacemaker cells. So decrease conduction velocity, and we slow pacemaker cells. So as we move into a moderate hypothermia, we start seeing a decrease in heart rate, and a decrease in blood pressure. When we enter severe hypothermia, we lose the ability to release catecholamines. So as the brain would normally release epi, norepi, and the endocrine system would normally release epi, norepi to compensate for all of this bad shit that's happening, it can't do it because the brain doesn't work. I don't have that neuroendocrine communication anymore because the brain's just firing too slowly to actually have a good response. So we get what's called blunted catecholamine response. So this is my norepi and epi. I can't draw blunt well enough to put it on there. So normally, epi, norepi would respond to the heart, and they would allow for an increase in heart rate. But as the patient becomes more and more hypothermic, we see a blunted response too. Blunted response to catecholamines. So this is where we see the patient entering into either a bradycardia or asystole. So the most common thing that you'll see is that patient will go bradycardic and then into asystole. So you might see a PEA as well. As they lose the ability to vasoconstrict, they become severely acidotic, their heart rate drops too low to actually have adequate cardiac output. So this is where you start seeing PEA, asystole. And those are the most common causes of, or most common dysrhythmias and cardiac arrest for these patients. Now, Jesse said something else can happen.
VF, I thought.
Yeah, so VF and VT, when can they happen?
I'm not sure. I thought that was always because that's why we did.
They're highly irritable.
Yeah, run really gentle
right.
compressions. And
so they're most likely. So in terms, if we just leave them, so we leave them lying on the ground, and we just say, all right, man, this was your choice. We'll let you die out here. Probably going to go into a PEA or a bradycardia or a asystole. Now, when they're at increased risk of getting a VF or a VT is when we jostle them around, intubate them, even putting OPAs in. Anything that's going to trigger a response. If I intubate or put an OPA in, I send a vagal response, right? I have the vagus nerve that innervates basically my entire upper airway structure. So intubating stimulates a fairly significant vagal response, which can stimulate the heart. Well, the problem with the heart in this case is it is irritable. If you think about what's happening is as I am entering a severe, this is only really going to happen in severe hypothermia. If you think about what's happening is in my bloodstream, I'm circulating a lot of acid back to the heart because the periphery, remember is basally is shut down. I've got vasoconstriction in the periphery. I'm not sending a lot of oxygen there. I'm not getting a lot of oxygen because I'm not breathing quickly. And my cells are starved, so they're not getting what they need. So I enter an anaerobic metabolism, I start lactic acidosis, and I start circulating a lot of acid. So the problem with that is if I circulate acid to the heart, can cells live with high amounts of acid surrounding them? No. So what happens is this acid starts to attack the heart cells. And if we look at what's happening in them, is they start releasing their intracellular contents, or the cells of the heart start dying. So we have a high acidotic environment. If this is my heart cell, it starts to have its walls broken down by this acid. So I start to see destruction of the cell walls, and it releases what ion? Potassium. So I start to see patchy areas of ischemia and acidosis where I'm releasing all of this potassium. So I get little patches in the heart that are hyperkalemic and destroyed from this acidosis, or this circulation of acidotic blood. So part of it is I have little patchy areas of ischemia that increase irritability because the cells are dying, releasing their intracellular content, and we know that potassium starts increasing that resting membrane potential. Now, part of the problem is how quickly are impulses traveling down my heart at this point? Slowly. So what that does is it really increases my relative refractory period, or it really, really increases that amount of time when I have ions on the wrong side of the membrane. So the slower an impulse moves, the longer our relative refractory period is. So if you think about cardioversion, we're trying to avoid that relative refractory period because we don't want to put the person into a VF or VT, and that's what happens here. Is one of these little dudes who's irritable or has all this acidotic blood and this potassium circulating around him says, oh man, I'm getting amped up. I got lots of potassium, I got lots of acid, I'm the captain now, I'm taking over. So he sends out this little impulse, and if the rest of the heart is in the relative refractory period, it just fucks everything up. We basically see the heart doesn't know how to respond, things are in the wrong place, and we see a lot of irritability resulting. So that VF or VTAC is related to this patchy areas of ischemia from the recirculation of acidotic blood. So same thing, if you think about gentle handling, if I accidentally drop this guy off the stretcher, he hits the ground, and I get enough stimulus to jostle one of those areas of the heart that are acidotic or have lots of potassium, it can stimulate an impulse. It can mistake that as an impulse coming from the top region of the heart, and it can end up leading to a VTAC or a VF. Does that make sense?
Bill, would you see the longer or wider QRS complexes a little bit?
Yeah, so very similarly to someone who's in a hyperkalemia, initially you'll just have that bradycardic rhythm, but as the patient gets sicker and sicker, you start seeing that kind of sinusoidal nature to it. And that's because we're doing the exact same thing in hypothermia. We're just spreading everything out, just as we do in hyperkalemia. So you can start seeing that idioventricular rhythm or really slow ventricular response, or just the patient goes into VF. Does that make sense? So again, if we're looking at how that will be worded or how that will be questioned to you, it would basically be something along the lines of gentle handling in the hypothermic patient is important because, and I can put them into VTAC and VF. They may ask something along the lines of, what's the pathophysiology behind it? And it's the patchy areas of ischemia and recirculation of acidotic blood. Does that make sense how we can progress through the stages of hypothermia?
Why would the acidotic blood in the periphery start to recirculate again, or is it just because everything is acidotic?
Yeah, so it's because so generally it's trying to shut down. It doesn't want to have it's trying to keep blood away from the periphery, but we can't shut it down fully. So you start recirculating those metabolites, and the longer you're hypothermic, the more of your body that becomes acidotic. Because acidosis is progressive, right? If it starts in my hands, it's going to progress up my arms because it starts killing cells, creating more environment that's toxic, and it's just a consistent cycle. So that's why you see it in kind of the later hypothermia. Any questions? Any other questions?
So yeah, decrease conduction velocity, slow pace major cells.
Yeah, I think
blunted norepi and epi
right.
stimulation.
Yeah, so we can have blunted catecholamine response, response. And the last one really is the recirculation of acidotic blood. So what's the risk of giving fluid to this person then? Because they'll be hypotensive, right? So this will be the guy who's lying in the snowbank, who's bradycardic, hypotensive. What's the risk of giving him a whole bunch of fluid?
Heart can't beat fast enough.
That's part of it. The heart really can't accommodate it because it's beating too slow. So we'll increase our preload beyond the point that we're capable of accepting. What else?
There's going to be a fluid shift in the lungs because of
Sure, fluid shift in the lungs.
So moving that acidotic blood towards the heart a lot faster.
Yeah, so I start moving acidotic blood towards the heart a lot faster. So if you think about the saline, it's been in my warm truck all day. So I've kept the saline in my warm truck. Now I hook it up to the person who's probably much cooler than the saline that's in that bag. So I start running that saline into the person. I start warming up their periphery. I'm going to take all that acidotic blood and I'm going to circulate it right to the heart. So that's what we call the after drop. And that's why when you see them go into the hospital, they put the bear hugger on them. So they strictly change environment only. You guys seen that big mattress-like thing that goes on top of the patient? So they try to change the environmental conditions only. So they just slowly increase the environmental temperature surrounding that patient so that they don't, so they can slowly recirculate that blood. And they'll be giving them things like insulin, sodium bicarb, and trying to correct any of that potential acidosis and electrolyte imbalances that happen as you recirculate that. They recirculate that acidotic blood. A lot of these patients will go into rhabdomyolysis anyways and die.
So the old thing of putting a saline liter bag on dash to keep warm in the wintertime, that's not good.
Yeah, to run. So running warm fluid through people is absolutely contraindicated in severe hypothermia. That's what they actually talk about when they talk about active rewarming in the BLS. That's what active rewarming is. Catheterization with warm fluid is active rewarming. Arterial recirculation is active rewarming, and then pumping IV fluids that are warm is active rewarming.
That's what they'll eventually do, but given the patients on ECMO with dialysis going,
You got it. Exactly, and that's a big thing. ECMO and dialysis, they'll do whatever they want, right? They'll rewarm them, but in terms of if they're sitting around this range, let's put a bear hugger on them, hook up some glucose and some insulin, and just hope that they can reverse those two effects.
would there be any benefit for us patching for like bicarb or calcium gluconate?
If we have bicarb, it would be beneficial. The calcium gluconate, you won't circulate it. And if you think about the risk versus benefit, even the bicarb, starting the IV and pushing it probably isn't worth the risks that come along with it. So again, they probably will save it until they can get central access, right, and avoid the periphery as much as they can. So I don't think we get the order. The big thing for these patients is just what the director says, right? It's just transport them to the hospital. One shot, do nothing else for them. The only case that might be different is the hypothermic drowning, right? Because we have an airway problem that trumps our environment problem. Does that make sense? After drop makes sense. There'll guaranteed be questions about after drop.
Are they going to be changing all that stuff in the BLS on right now? Isn't there different like heat pads in their armpit?
Yeah, so I think there's a misinterpretation that active rewarming includes putting heat packs in people's armpits. That's still passive rewarming. So you can just stick you can still stick heat packs in the groin axilla, and that for patients who are hypothermic is fine. It's under severe hypothermia that they say absolutely no active rewarming. And really what they mean by that is don't start IVs on these people because you're going to start pushing warm fluid through their bodies, recirculating acidotic blood. Make sense?
So what would be like a definition of
After drop?
after drop?
After drop is the recirculation of cool acidotic blood to the heart.
Okay.
Good question. Sounds like exam material.
Can you touch on that sensible versus insensible? I didn't
Sure.
quite catch the different.
Yep. So sensible basically means that here.
Safe during resuscitation.
So when we're talking about sensible heat loss, really all it means is that the heat must flow down a temperature gradient. So if we're talking about conduction convection and radiation, it has to flow from basically a warm environment to a cooler environment.
Yeah.
So we picture this being the skin again. Really what has to happen is heat is building up inside the body. It can only leave via conduction and convection if the environment is cooler. So again, if the body, say, is 40 degrees Celsius and the outside is maybe really 20 degrees Celsius, we have a great gradient. So we can just push as much heat as we want out into the environment. And that's a sensible heat loss.
Okay.
So basically, if you think about it, it just makes sense that there has to be a gradient involved.
Yep.
The insensible heat loss simply means that it doesn't matter what the temperature inside and outside the body is. It strictly depends on moisture content. So when we're talking about evaporation, again, if I have lots of water inside the body and only a little bit outside, basically our definition of osmosis, right? We're going to flow from high to low gradient. So lots of water can exit the body. The problem is when it's very humid outside. And we have the inside of the body, and we can't because that gradient doesn't exist. We can't make it out there because there's already too much water in the environment.
Okay.
Any questions about that?
Less moist, make it more moist. Yes, that makes sense.
And then the only other thing is, what's the risk that it develops when someone gets frostbite or deep frostbite?